June 1944. The Second World War had reached a critical moment. The only way to stop Hitler in his tracks and to reclaim lost territory was to launch the largest seaborne invasion in history, the moment that became known as D-Day.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
The D-Day invasion was spearheaded by paratroopers. Leaping into the unknown, their job was to prevent enemy reinforcements. Without their actions, Allied victory in the West would not have been possible.
I have to tell you, everybody says we're heroes, and that isn't true. We volunteered to do this, we trained to do it, and we were paid to do it. That does not make you a hero.
There could have been no spearhead and no paratroopers without the workhorses of the sky, the Douglas C-47s, the airplanes that flew in their hundreds across the English Channel to Normandy. Charged with delivering the airborne divisions to their rendezvous with destiny, one airplane had to lead the way.
It seemed totally beyond comprehension that the airplane that led the D-Day invasion, this incredibly important artifact, would be in a scrapyard. There's just no way that that can be true.
I just had a feeling there's something special about this airplane. And he said, well, that airplane was the lead plane into Normandy.
This is the story of the men who found and who were determined to restore this iconic aircraft, of the plane's part in one defining moment in history, and of a dream that she should fly again back to the coast of France to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That's All Brother, the plane that led the D-Day invasion.
At the end of May 1944, the whole of northwestern Europe was under Nazi control, but that was about to change. Before any invasion could take place, the Allies needed air superiority. And in the weeks leading up to D-Day, the RAF and the US Army Air Forces combined in a concerted series of attacks on the German aviation infrastructure. They bombed factories, they attacked airfields and aircraft storage depots. New tactics unleashed fighters to sweep the skies of Europe, so that when D-Day came, aerial supremacy would be in the grip of the Allies. And the troops landing on the beaches, under the shield of Allied fighter protection, suffered minimal interference from the Luftwaffe.
For the invasion to stand any chance of success, it was imperative that the Allies first secured strategic objectives behind enemy lines. The only way to achieve this was to drop troops in from the air. This was a new tactic, only fully developed in World War II, and the C-47 Skytrain was derived from the civilian Douglas DC-3 airliner to fulfill this role.
It was a great airplane to fly. I thought they should make one in gold and put it on top of a mountain. I've got about 2,000 hours in C-47s, yeah. But I love the airplane. It's the most forgiving airplane in the world. And, well, you know, it wasn't made by mistake.
Without the C-47, you don't have any paratroopers. We're not very emotional, but most of us are emotional about a C-47. I can't explain it. Most of them would give the right arm to ride in a C-47 today.
Over 10,000 C-47s were built between 1943 and 1945, and it proved to be one of the most durable and successful of all transport planes.
When the war came along, the inventory was studied to see what was available. And with the Douglas commercial transport, you had an aircraft that could carry paratroopers far more effectively than any other aircraft of the time.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch
on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
As a civilian transport plane, it left behind the corrugated fabric-covered aircraft of the era. It took air travel in America a leap forward. People could fly in comfort, with speed, with heat, and a lot more safety because the aircraft was designed to be able to fly on one engine. Many twin-engine aircraft of the era could not. If you lost an engine, you were done for. With the DC-3 and the later C-47, you lost an engine, you could keep flying.
Just as these planes were being built, new shock troops had to be trained in this new form of combat. And so, in time, were born the paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions.
They were going to have a special unit such as the Army had never had before. And it was going to be run by a guy named Colonel Sink. 6,500 people applied and were accepted. He didn't want old Army people in there at all because they had old ways. He wanted all new people straight out of civilian life. The discipline was instantaneous and terrible. The least miscalculation or any problem, you're out. They sent you to 27th Infantry Division. The food was awful. And if you didn't get in line, the last 3 or 4 guys may not get anything. And that was by design. It was so bad that he had us all sit on a hillside one day and said, "I hear you people aren't happy." "Yeah." "You don't like the food?" "No." "You think I'm too hard on you?" "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm going to tell you, it's going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets any better." And then he walked away. And that was it. Now, we hated him during that training. Absolutely hated that man. But when we got to combat and saw how he operated, there isn't a man wouldn't have followed him to hell and back.
But what of the plane that led the invasion, the very tip of the spearhead? She was neither remembered nor accounted for. Had she, in fact, been lost to history? Apparently, no one knew. Then, by chance, 2 military historians, Matt Scales and Ken Tilley, found themselves in possession of some key evidence that might help to resolve the mystery of the missing plane.
I heard a rumor that a member of our squadron had flown the lead C-47 on D-Day. And I thought, and I knew who the pilot was, John Donaldson. He had been a member of my squadron since 1924. And so when I hear this rumor, I said, no, that's the wrong kind of plane. It's the wrong part of the world. So where's this coming from? So in the summer of 2007, I had the opportunity to go to the Air Force Historical Research Agency on a temporary assignment, actually, at the time. And I met up with another historian named Ken Tilley, and he's also from Alabama, and we're actually from the same small hometown up in the northern part of the state. And because of that, I told him, because John Donaldson was from Alabama, so I said, can we figure out, where this rumor is coming from? He said, yeah, let's look it up. So, and looked into the Pathfinders. Those were fairly well documented, saw, okay, he didn't fly a Pathfinder aircraft. Okay, well, what's the main wave, the lead wave behind the Pathfinders? Find out that it's the 438 Troop Carrier Group. And so Ken takes me up to the 3rd floor of the archives, and we pulled the 438's history. And there's a picture of John Donaldson as the commander of the group. And so I was like, wow, okay, so he is there. And we pulled the June history, and we look at it, and it says, Colonel John Donaldson, along with Lieutenant Colonel David Daniel, took off in C-47 4292847. And we were floored, because it's very rare for even partial tail numbers to be listed in histories. It's unheard of for full tail numbers to be listed in histories. And so when we saw that, we were just, my attention at that point immediately shifted to the aircraft.
Having established that John Donaldson had indeed transferred squadrons and flown the aircraft that led the invasion, Matt then set about tracing the serial number 4292847. To his surprise, he discovered that the plane still existed, but her fate was uncertain. She was in the boneyard at Basler Turbo Conversions at Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where many airplanes are given a new life but only after major, irreversible modification.
A chill ran down my spine when I saw that it went to Basler. I was familiar with Basler. I knew, what they did, and I thought, don't get me wrong, Basler is a great company, and I like their product. I really do. I think it's cool what they do and a way they breathe new life into these airplanes. But at the same time, all I could think was, there's so many DC-3s and C-47s out there. Why this one? And so I actually called Basler and said, hey, I don't know if you know, but this airplane led the invasion of Normandy, and they were very nice, very, very nice. And they thanked me for the information. And again, I understand they got a job to do, they got a business to run, and I don't fault them for that. And I said, just thought I'd let you know. And they said, okay, thank you. And so I just thought, well, that's all I can do.
Some years later, Matt, as a proactive member of online warbird communities, discovered that the lead plane, thought to be named in wartime Belle of Birmingham and usually assigned to Donaldson and his crew, might be up for sale. This could only mean that she was still intact. By good fortune, a member of the Commemorative Air Force, the world's largest flying warbird collection, was then alerted to the story.
I distinctly remember a few weeks after joining the CAF, I read a blog article from Whitman Regional Airport, and it caught my attention because it was where I used to live and work in Oshkosh. And it seemed to be saying that the airplane that led the D-Day invasion was sitting in the boneyard at Basler. And that really caught my attention because just from my own history, I knew that boneyard and I knew the kind of stuff that was hanging around there. And the idea that an airplane that had a significant place in history had been basically rediscovered really captured my attention. And now I'm working for the CAF, the world's leading World War II aviation preservation flying museum, and I'm thinking, wow, this could be a great opportunity. This is the kind of airplane that this organization should aspire to own.
Doug Rosendahl, the chairman of the CAF, as well as an experienced C-47 pilot, knows the value of preserving these aircraft for future generations.
So the CAF was founded over 50 years ago by some crop dusters in South Texas who, quite frankly, were probably most honestly trying to figure out a way to make their fun World War II fighter airplanes tax deductible. It's grown into a lot more than that. We've been in existence for over 50 years. We're the largest flying museum in the world, have the largest collection of flying World War II airplanes with approximately 170 planes that we operate. They're scattered all across the country and in some foreign countries. And we use those airplanes as a tool to tell a story. And we use those stories to inspire young people to realize that they can overcome adversity, that there was a time in our history, not really that long ago, when our way of life was really in peril.
The mystery of the missing plane appealed to the CAF, and it fell to Keegan to try to prove the provenance of the aircraft.
One of our CAF staffers, who is from Wisconsin, sort of keeps track of his hometown news stories. And he kind of brought it to me with the, can this really be true? It seemed quite unbelievable. In reading the materials that were assembled, there was a number of sort of factual inaccuracies that sort of made it believable that the whole story was in fact false. The name of the airplane, for instance, was identified as Belle of Birmingham because this had been the name of Colonel Donaldson's aircraft. Mind you, the story of Belle of Birmingham was known. That airplane was cut up. It was well documented. So there was this name, there was a serial number referenced, but there wasn't a real clear link between the two. And so it lent itself to some questioning and skepticism around the claim that Matt was making. So I originally set out to disprove it.
First came the need to sort out fact from fiction. Keegan began with the serial number and, cross-referencing it against the aircraft's record card, he discovered that it had departed for England. He also confirmed that, as part of the 9th Troop Carrier Command, she belonged to the squadron of planes that was to drop the first regular troops into Normandy. What Keegan needed now was one further piece of evidence confirming Matt's findings that this was the lead plane.
One afternoon while we were searching, we stumbled into a company that has been digitizing films possessed by the National Archives here in the United States. And in one such search, we did find the serial number. So clicking on the film reel, we learned that the film was shot on the night of June 5th, right before the D-Day invasion began. And so we watched the film reel and realized only a couple minutes in that we were looking at 4292847 as the lead ship. The film showed the airplane, showed the generals sending it off. The film actually allowed us to confirm that the airplane had led the D-Day invasion.
So how did this detailed archive footage, shot the day before D-Day at the airbase from which the first planes left, come to be filmed?
Greenham Common, England. When Eisenhower came here on the 5th of June, he was accompanied by a retinue, the press corps, the media, members of the publicity and psychological warfare section. He'd helped establish this. He knew the value of propaganda. The publicity and psychological warfare section was established to disseminate both black and white propaganda. Black would of course be like fake news today, to disturb and disrupt and confuse the enemy. White propaganda would be nearer the truth. It would be for the folks back home to help sell war bonds. Cameramen filmed a relaxed Eisenhower with the troops. They also filmed in detail the aircraft being prepared and paratroopers boarding, including the aircraft that would be leading the operation that day.
With confirmation of the plane's serial number, there still remained the question of her name. As Keegan had confirmed, the Belle of Birmingham was no more. So what was her identity?
As the cameras zoomed in on the airplane and panned around it, there was a great deal of attention paid to this aircraft. It was obvious that the cameramen knew the historic significance of what they were looking at. And as the camera panned past the nose, the name That's All Brother appeared on the screen. And at that one instant in time, we realized, wow, this is its name. This is the story. This incredible airplane has been lost. And we're sitting here, and it's been found. And at the same moment, the thought entered our minds that, what if we can't save it? We knew that it was at Basler, and we knew that Basler has a degree of efficiency about converting these airplanes. And we sort of leapt from that office into action because we had to be able to find out what had happened to this airplane. We had to know if it was something that was in our power to save, if there was anything that we could do. And it turns out that there was.
Finally, the correct name for the serial number had been found, alleviating Keegan's earlier doubts about the plane's provenance. The CAF were now driven by the need to acquire That's All Brother, and, in time, they struck a mutually satisfactory deal with Basler for her purchase and restoration.
I bought this airplane probably more than 10 years ago, and I just had a feeling there was something with this airplane, so we never brought it through for conversion. I always moved it to the back of the line. Every time it came up for conversion, I pushed it to the back, just because I had this gut feeling there's something special about this airplane. And I'm glad we did, because now, had we not done that, this airplane would have been flying somewhere else in the world as a BT-67 with turbine engines on it. So we're bringing it in and bringing it back to the day it left the Douglas factory back in 1942. We're going to put it back to all original specifications as the day it left. And we're ecstatic. You know, without the CAF, this airplane wouldn't last or wouldn't be kept in the condition that it was without them.
It turns out that Doug's history of flying C-47s was linked to this very plane also.
This particular airplane was purchased by a friend of mine probably 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, and he called me and asked me to check him out in it. I trained him, checked him out, we flew it together quite a bit, and he just didn't have the time to campaign the airplane on the air show circuit like he would want. He was trying to sell the airplane, he was trying to convince me to buy it, and I just didn't have need for a DC-3 or the ability to take care of it. So ultimately, he sold it here to Basler Turbo Conversions and called me and asked me to fly it here with him. So we flew the airplane up here, parked it out on the ramp just outside the building, and I admit unashamedly that when I walked away from it, I had a tear in my eye knowing that this airplane's days as a DC-3 were over. Fast forward, I think 7 years, and it became known that this airplane was That's All Brother, the airplane that led the D-Day raid. And fortunately, we at the CAF were able to acquire this airplane and bring it back to its former glory and preserve this iconic piece of American history.
I think the first time that I saw the airplane up in Oshkosh, there was no nose art, anything like that. And there really wasn't anyone around. And it was profound to look up at this airplane and realize a string of lucky chances kept this airplane and kept it for us, waiting for us. It was over at Basler, and had it been a few aircraft ahead in the line, it would have already been gone. I guess the gravity of the whole thing was actually that it had survived. And what really struck home was I climbed up inside the airplane and I stopped and stood in the doorway and realized, for whatever else that may have changed about the airplane, that door threshold hadn't. That was the door that those 101st Airborne paratroopers jumped out of. And a thought passed into my mind that when the 101st was established, their founding commander pointed out to the men while they were all assembled in a field that their division, the 101st Airborne Division, had no history, but that they were a division that had a rendezvous with destiny. And at that moment I realized, this is the door. This is where those men stepped out to attend that rendezvous with destiny. And that was a powerful thought. It's just sort of stopped me in my tracks, and it's still something that when I reflect on that moment, takes me back to this whole story and the excitement of finding the airplane.
January 1944. As the date for invasion drew closer, there was an urgent need for more C-47s. That's All Brother was being built, along with some 400 others, as part of a rush contract. She was accepted into the Army Air Force on March the 8th, a mere 3 months ahead of D-Day. The immediacy of her mission meant that the plane flew via the Atlantic Bridge directly to the UK.
Europe was at war. Aircraft were vitally needed. The Atlantic Air Bridge was a vital supply chain for aircraft essential for the RAF and the United States Army Air Forces in Europe, flying from North American factories through Canada to Greenland to Iceland, over the treacherous icy wastes and the seas, coming in to Scotland and then to the frontline operations in England. Nowadays you can board a jet airliner in Europe and fly non-stop over the Atlantic. In those days the aircraft did not have the range to do it.
By the time she reached Greenham Common in the south of England, there were mere weeks of preparation until her defining moment. A defining moment for everyone.
At the time this happened, World War II happened, most kids had never been in Algernon County. You didn't travel. None of us had ever been in an airplane. Over the Midwest, many of them had never seen an airplane. And all of a sudden, all of the things you read about Europe, all the big cities, all the big churches and everything, we're going to go see all that stuff for free. We get to see that. We get to live some of the history that we read about and all the battles that were there at that time. Yeah. Can you imagine what that's like for a bunch of kids that never been anyplace? I have told many people I got much more out of my service than I ever put into it.
At Basler, the restoration work is underway.
Well, we take an original seat and we get these same dimensions, and then we proceed to try and roll this to the same shape, and then we put the brackets on. We generally use the original brackets, but we generally change the skin because the original seats were made out of magnesium, and magnesium had a tendency to crack. So what we see is a lot of patching over patches over patches, and eventually you have so many patches that it doesn't do any good. Right here is one of the seat bottoms, and it's kind of a complex shape. We've got a lot of radius and stuff, and so we've actually made a fixture that we could take this particular part and we could press this out, and it's the same as the original. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of work involved in them.
Thankfully, the folks here at Basler, because of their work on the BT-67 turbo conversions, they have all of these parts in stock. And so there is nothing on a C-47 that they can't do relatively easily. And it's wonderful to see, you know, what 30 years ago you could find all across America. It's really exciting to be in a place like this and see the hands and the minds and the talent that exist in this restoration process.
Having saved the aircraft, the CAF's plan, in the light of her historical importance, is to return That's All Brother to France in 2019 as part of the D-Day anniversary celebrations. To achieve this ambitious goal, she must be in perfect flying condition to fly the arduous journey over the Atlantic, retracing her former steps.
This was the airplane that led the raid. There were some airplanes that went ahead of this airplane that were called Pathfinders. But when the actual we're going to go, this very airplane that we're sitting in today was the airplane that launched out. And it came back and made 2 or 3 more trips later that day as well. Sometimes we get a little wrapped up in the provenance. At the end of the day, that provenance is important, but what's really important is the story that this airplane and others like it have to tell. Our audience is those that would ask, what kind of an airplane is that, and what did it do, and why is it important? But it's always better, more exciting, more intriguing to have the real thing. And in this case, we have that, and that's really special. Well, certainly the ultimate goal is to take this airplane back to D-Day, to the coast of France in 2019 for the 75th anniversary of the invasion.
So the plan is clear, albeit ambitious, but already time is at a premium and the pressure is on.
Once it was found out that the history of it and the process that took place, it's now a very unique experience for me to be looking for parts to restore it. That's something that normally we haven't dealt with. New surplus is the way we describe it. And yes, we have a warehouse there where the company has, whenever available, we have purchased the parts for the C-47, and we do have a large reserve that we draw from on a regular basis, and it does make the process much easier and more complete. I've got the hydraulic landing gear pressure gauge here, and it was packaged in March of ⁴, and it remains unopened. So sort of early Christmas each time we get to do this. They packed it with a desiccant. We're looking for a serviceable gauge to use on That's All Brother. This one I'll have to go out and look again for another one.
Though there are gauges to hand, it is by no means certain that an intact, serviceable replacement is amongst them. On such small but vital details do these restorations and ultimately lives depend.
If we can find one that there's no corrosion or anything, we'll have it sent in to make sure that it is serviceable gauge, and then we'll be able to install that onto the aircraft. Now this one looks in better shape than the first one that I had opened. Don't have the corrosion on it, so this would be a candidate for to send in and have it tested and certified.
The planes that preceded the main paratroop drop were called Pathfinder aircraft. Their mission was to drop Pathfinder units to establish the drop zones and set up radar systems to guide the main paratroop force.
They told us everything about the airborne operation, what time they were hitting the beaches. We knew pretty well the whole scheme of what was programmed. And it's just as well we did. We only lost one plane in Normandy, and we got the whole crew and all the parachutists back. Because the plane ditched, it got hit by anti-aircraft fire, put out an engine from the island of Sark. And they landed in the water right next to a Canadian Corvette. They've got their feet wet, but they stepped off onto the nets. It was off the side of the Corvette. The Corvette had to sink the airplane because it was a hazard to navigation. But I saw it as the beginning of the end. Yeah. But then I thought it would be sooner than it was. But no, it wasn't.
Following the Pathfinder units came the first wave of paratroopers. However, by then, the weather and enemy activity had significantly worsened.
We went across the channel. There was high cirrus clouds, so you could still see the shadows on the water below. And of course, you got all this equipment on you, and you know, in your pockets and everything, and it's pushing into you, and very uncomfortable. And then you've got bullets coming up through the floor and going out the ceiling, and you see that going on, and you think, you know, should I get up and move here? How about over there? I don't know. And then somebody gets shot laying on the floor, and you look at the guy and you think, damn, everybody says, let's get the hell out of here. Come on, let's get out of here. That's what they did. They said, hey, we want out. Let's go. What's holding it up? Your adrenaline is running, and if you can't assuage that adrenaline, it ruins you. It's hard on you, mentally and physically. And so you're sitting there and you can't do anything about it. And so the instinct then is to get away from the position you're in. Getting out that door looks better than staying there. And that's the feeling of everybody.
We're at the American cemetery in Normandy, and amongst the thousands of graves, young men resting here, we found one, William D. Cross, from the 101st Airborne. But he died on June the 6th, 1944, in that first wave. William Cross was one of those 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, the young men that leapt out of the aircraft, including That's All Brother. So she, as we move on in history, will take that story forward and will honour and remember the young men that leapt from that C-47. This is humbling. There aren't words really that you can use, you just feel it. You look at this and you look at the cost and you think of the lives. It's very powerful. And it's powerful in the sense also that what the CAF are trying to do with That's All Brother is to keep that story alive so that the thousands of young men here aren't forgotten. Freedom isn't free, and this makes that point more clearly than anywhere else you will ever find.
At the end of the war, and as anticipated, many of the C-47s were destroyed or disposed of in theatre. However, some survived, luckily including That's All Brother. She was declared surplus to requirement by the Air Force, transported back to the US, and sent to Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, an established boneyard. From there, she was fortunate to be sold into civilian hands to undertake a wide variety of jobs, transporting both people and cargo and undergoing several modifications.
This airplane at some point in its life had an executive interior in it, and insulation was fitted between these bell formers here, and then an interior was put in, and when it was somewhere along the line it was converted back to a freighter, and they put a cargo liner in here and failed to take out the insulation. And that insulation trapped water. So from the floorboards to the ceiling, the entire airframe that we're sitting in right now was riddled with corrosion, and much of these formers and stringers that you see here have been replaced already.
Following further inspections, the corrosion in the aircraft's fuselage was found to be significantly worse than they had originally thought. Huge sections had to be replaced. Vital work, doing nothing to relieve the time pressures.
Okay, here we have a part that came off the aircraft, and it's been inspected, and we found some corrosion on it. We can't clean this up and reuse it. We definitely have to make a new one. We've got it's cracked there, it's got some corrosion, some cracking in here, and we just can't repair that part, so we're going to make a brand new one. We don't happen to have these in stock at all, so we have to produce this again. So this is another example where we have to take this original part, we'll put it on a piece of phenolic, we'll trace it out, we'll grind it out, we'll grind all the correct angles on it, we'll make another template, and then we'll form it, and then it'll go through our inspection process, and then it will go on our airplane.
The next major attack is to take on the wiring. This airplane, when I was flying it previously, was an incredibly good running, well operating airplane in every respect except electrical. And the electrical system in it was kind of a nightmare. And we're going to tear out all of the electrical wiring in the airplane and start from scratch. So we're going to solve that problem in this restoration. So the engines will come off shortly. That's a relatively straightforward process. They'll go out and they'll be overhauled and brought back and put on. There's still a lot of radial engines in service, both in the commercial service and in the museum/airshow warbird community. So we have good access to good overhaulers, and that piece is fairly straightforward. Again, the most challenging part is money.
Not all the C-47s that survived were sold into civilian service. Some were retained by the military and took part in the Berlin airlift and the Korean and Vietnam Wars. In this latter conflict, it became clear that, thanks to their slow speed and their stability, C-47s were ideally suited to ground support roles. Miniguns were mounted in the fuselage and deployed by the pilot as the plane banked around a target on the ground. Once again, the C-47 was proving adaptable and versatile. Versatile indeed, but still subject to the ravages of time. The team at Basler were hoping simply to recover the original ailerons, but after removing the old fabric and having cleaned the metal, they discovered they needed a much more thorough and time-intensive restoration. The team set about replacing corroded parts, reusing as much of the original structure as possible and recovering with new fabric, employing the same skills she would have recognized when first built.
So here we have a C-47 aileron, and one thing that when you see it off you get a sense of the scale of it. The control surfaces on most World War II airplanes were fabric covered because fabric was a non-strategic material. Aluminum was in short supply. And they also knew that lighter control surfaces flew better and were less susceptible to flutter. And so many of the World War II airplanes, up to and including the high-speed fighters, had fabric control surfaces on it. So fabric is an old skill. Some would say a lost art, but it's obviously alive and well here in Wisconsin.
Meanwhile, the engines have returned after being fully overhauled, and the CAF are one step closer to their dream of returning that soul brother to Normandy.
Now this is an 1830, Pratt & Whitney's powered 1830. Of course we're looking at a 14-cylinder twin roll radial engine, producing a little over 1,000 horse. This engine has been through the overhaul facility, completely overhauled to zero time. We have procured a new exhaust for this engine. The old exhaust has been too many years of wear and tear. The dish pan itself is new. Will be, though, the original engine mount. You can see we have completely overhauled the engine mount. So the airframe, when it came to us, has been modified several times. This exhaust tunnel that we're seeing in here was completely removed, skinned over. It had a short exhaust stack put on it. We have gone back to the original. The plumbing had been modified horribly on this airplane. We've gone back to original plumbing. Of course, you can see all the controls linkages that go in here are all removed. I'm currently waiting on new bearings. The bearings were froze solid. This airplane needed a lot of TLC, and we're putting a lot of love into this girl. So she's getting new bearings put into it. Everything in this thing will be back to the way it was when it was flying coming out of the factory. It's gone from a serviceable airplane to an overhauled airframe. I love this project. It's been great. I'm really excited to see this thing get finished and get up and flying.
We're very close to installation of the remaining cockpit items, control column, connecting up flight control cables. We're in the process of doing the hydraulic and engine fuel plumbing. Following that, we'll have to run control cables and engine control cables as well as flight control cables. The engine has proven itself to be a workhorse, and this engine is expensive nowadays to overhaul or maintain, but it is really amazing if you stop to consider the engine itself, that it was designed in a time before computers and all that. So the men that not only flew it but designed it was a great generation of men.
This engine was built in great numbers during the war. Indeed, it was the most widely used aviation engine of its day. It was used not only on the C-47, but also on the most prolific bomber, the B-24. America had refined the mass production process, and, thanks to the abundance of fuel and raw materials, the US became the fastest as well as largest manufacturer of arms during the war. They manufactured planes, tanks, and warships, as well as small arms, ammunition, and field supplies, and consequently the US was one of the best equipped wartime armies.
I carried about 125 pounds on me, and I weighed 132. And some guys carried more than that, some of the bigger guys. We carried a mine. Everybody carried a tank mine. We carried about 6 grenades. We all carried about 50 feet of primacord. Most of it wrapped around our helmet. We carried 12 blasting caps in our pocket. Now in civilian life, you can't even have those in the same vehicle. When you go to buy them, you can't carry caps and explosive in the same thing. We carried them right on us. We also carried C2, which was a very powerful new type of explosive. But I carried an M1 rifle. All the non-coms carried a folding stock carbine, 30 caliber carbine. And we carried 3 days ration. That means 9 K rations. And whatever else we wanted in way of equipment. We're supposed to carry socks, but nobody did. I didn't take my boots off for the whole 30 days, and when I took them off, there was no socks. It was like Jell-O, and I just took it like that and sloughed it off my feet.
Back at Basler, and just in time, attention turns to the wings. Along with the engines, these are the final major components to be fitted, and consequently allow the team to focus more closely on her authenticity in every detail.
In the sort of landscape of warbirds, it's really interesting to observe where people's attentions and where their interests lie. If you're restoring a P-51 Mustang, you can find out the exact proportion of lamp black that was applied to the zinc chromate at North American in Inglewood, so that your Mustang can come out as a Concours winning Mustang, And you can do a similar thing with a B-17. but it hasn't been done with a C-47. They're sort of the forgotten warhorse of the war years. They carried all these men, they carried all the air cargo, they ferried the wounded back out of Normandy. In the specific case of That's All Brother, it participates in every major Allied airborne operation in the remainder of the war following D-Day. And what you can't find anywhere is any of that information. There's no book written on how to put the airplane back together or how it looked during the war. They were so ubiquitous they went through a dozen different cockpit configurations. They soldiered on for so long after the war that there isn't one out there that survives truly unmodified, out there flying. And so for us, surveying the scale of the task and the importance of the airplane, it became really evident that if there ever was an airplane that needed to be showcased in its D-Day configuration, this would be that airplane, and that it was high time that a C-47 was restored to its wartime configuration as a tribute to the men and women who flew them.
The young airmen sitting in the cockpit of a C-47 faced fear. They faced the fear of anti-aircraft fire. They were at low altitude. Light AA fire could hit the aircraft, pierce the thin fuselage, and the pilots could sense the agitation of the paratroopers in the rear who wanted to get out and fight. And as the aircraft disgorged its parabundles and paratroopers, the centre of gravity shifted, the weight altered, the aircraft would rise. They had to keep the plane in formation and under control, and adjust and react to trim the C-47 as it shed its load over the battle zone. Many young men were lost. C-47s could be seen going down, but their job was to focus, to make sure that they got their aircraft over the drop zone.
A few weeks later, and That's All Brother is preparing for an important milestone in the restoration, the testing of her engines. Though every precaution has been taken, these are always anxious moments.
The engines are freshly overhauled. It's an absolutely critical time when all of the mechanics and the people who've been in charge of the restoration have been finishing the different systems on the airplane. Verify that all of those things are functional before we put pilots in the airplane and attempt to take off.
Squawks are noted, checked on the run. Nope. Aircraft and area clear. Yep. Gear lock pins installed. Wheels are chocked. Chocks here. Oil quantity 15 gallons minimum.
That was checked before we left the hangar. I got mixtures of cutoff, throttles at idle, and props are forward. We are ready for an engine start.
I need more hydraulic fluid. Taking pictures of my mess.
The team can never foresee every eventuality, proving the need for such tests, but the problem is very swiftly identified and resolved.
We did have a bit of a false start. A hydraulic fitting broke loose and we suffered quite a significant leak. but within just a few short minutes, the problem was traced to the hydraulic panel, to an original component. And with a quick replacement, the airplane is now back ready. The second engine run was conducted, and the airplane was run up successfully.
Dave, are we ready to make history again?
So.
3, 6, 9, 12, 15.
History's coming alive. It is absolutely outstanding. We still need to put the engine cowling on. It hasn't been cowled. Cowling has to be adjusted. We haven't got a full ground run as far as pulling all the power that these engines will pull to make sure that they're going to hold together. Great confidence that they will. We just haven't quite got there. As soon as we get the rest of the engine indications up and running, we'll be pulling power on them. We really need to get a gear swing in. We haven't got the gears swung yet, but there really is not a lot of maintenance left to be done. We're really close for first flights. As anybody in the aviation industry knows, not till the paperwork's done.
Perhaps the most special thing about it was as the aircraft approached full throttle on the engines, you could see it just sort of shake in the chocks. You could see lift forming under the wings and under the tail. And as the airplane sat there jumping up and down, I don't think there was anyone among us who couldn't imagine how exciting it was going to be to see this airplane fly. The sentiment is that it wants to fly at this point. After 3 years of restoration and more than 22,000 man-hours, the airplane is ready, and we are very nearly ready to let it fly.
The plane wants to fly, but can she? Will she make it back to Normandy? Her second defining moment awaits her. June 1944. The Second World War had reached a critical moment. The only way to stop Hitler in his tracks and to reclaim lost territory was to launch the largest seaborne invasion in history, the moment that became known as D-Day.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
The D-Day invasion was spearheaded by paratroopers. Leaping into the unknown, their job was to prevent enemy reinforcements. Without their actions, Allied victory in the West would not have been possible.
I have to tell you, everybody says we're heroes, and that isn't true. We volunteered to do this, we trained to do it, and we were paid to do it. That does not make you a hero.
There could have been no spearhead and no paratroopers without the workhorses of the sky, the Douglas C-47s, the airplanes that flew in their hundreds across the English Channel to Normandy. Charged with delivering the airborne divisions to their rendezvous with destiny, one airplane had to lead the way.
It seemed totally beyond comprehension that the airplane that led the D-Day invasion, this incredibly important artifact, would be in a scrapyard. There's just no way that that can be true.
I just had a feeling there's something special about this airplane. And he said, well, that airplane was the lead plane into Normandy.
This is the story of the men who found and who were determined to restore this iconic aircraft, of the plane's part in one defining moment in history, and of a dream that she should fly again back to the coast of France to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That's All Brother, the plane that led the D-Day invasion. So far, in the dramatic story of That's All Brother, we've learned how the lead plane on D-Day was lost, abandoned in a boneyard, how she was rediscovered by military historians and her identity confirmed by the Commemorative Air Force, how the CAF were determined to restore her so her part in dropping the very first paratroopers on D-Day could be fully recognised and honoured, how the plane's restoration at Basler turbo conversions was undertaken, repairing decades of neglect and corrosion, and how, crucially, after a faltering start, the engines were coaxed warily into life. Now thoughts turn urgently to her star-turn and most important mission to date, her return to Normandy for the anniversary of D-Day itself. But will she fly? In the brief interim, That's All Brother has been fitted with vital new engine cowlings and her landing gear has been satisfactorily and thoroughly tested. With the new cowlings in place, it has been possible to run the engines at full power. The signs are good, but still her team anxiously await the plane's most demanding test, her first flight.
Well, it's really exciting to be here. For me personally, to close the loop, the last time this airplane flew, I got to fly it in here, and to be honored to be the guy selected to fly it today is humbling and exciting. This airplane represents a big step in the Commemorative Air Force. When I started flying warbirds, CAF and other warbirds, over 30 years ago, the difference between a warbird and a freighter was a paint job. And this airplane represents how far we've come, both as the Commemorative Air Force and as a warbird industry, that we now have these examples of flying warbirds that are truly exquisite. I mean, this airplane is a Smithsonian quality restoration, and we're going to be able to take it out and fly it. So that's really a big step for the CAF, and I'm really excited to be part of an organization that is committed to preserving assets like this, but not just sticking them away in mothballs somewhere, but taking them out on the road so people can see them, and taking them to Normandy so the airplane that led the raid can fly over Normandy again, and that's a big deal.
And that comes up.
The big gotchas on any first flight in an airplane are the propellers going to govern correctly. Anytime you're flying a brand new engine, there is a chance of an initial failure, and so we got 2 new engines. You'd always choose to overhaul engines one at a time. Now we got 2 brand new engines, which is not what you'd want in a perfect world, but initial failures on new engines are always a threat, but typically they're not catastrophic failures, they're chronic failures. And so the first 20 hours on a new engine, you're always paying very close attention. And so no need or cause for any undue concern. First of all, it's an incredibly simple airplane. And by virtue of the restoration that it's been through, it's simpler, because most C-47s have been around for 75 years, and all these things have been modified. This airplane's been totally demodified back to its very basic, simple bones. And we have what this airplane was really intended to be, which is a simple airplane that was easy to fly for 19-year-old kids who, with 200 hours total time, who were immersed in this thing we called World War II. And so from an aviation perspective, yeah, it's a big deal, but it's really not a big deal. I'm quite certain we'll have a short list of things that need to be looked at when we get back, but as with every flight in an old airplane, you're prepared for the worst and expect the best, and that's what I expect today.
All right, welcome everyone to the first flight. Thank you everyone for being here. We're going to start off the safety briefing with the pilots. So Doug, Tom, are you guys ready to go? All right, aircraft from maintenance. Aircraft is ready to go. As far as the weather goes, we've kind of checked multiple sources. The weather's about as good as we're going to get in January in Wisconsin. So the snow that's out there right now is going to let off in the afternoon, so we should be able to get a good flight in this afternoon with adequate ceilings. The winds are 14 gusting to 20, but they're coming down the runway. Based on the direction, we plan on using the west runway, and we'll go with that.
So on the first flight, our objective is just put some time on the airplane. We're not going to be expanding the envelope, anything. Just make sure nothing's coming out of the airplane, smoke, oil, anything like that. We'll fly around for 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll land, take a look at the airplane, and make sure everything's clean and dry, and we'll have press availability at that point, and give some interviews, and then our plan will be to go fly again for the second flight. Any questions?
Yes, they are as prepared as they can be, and yes, every conceivable precaution has been taken. Nonetheless, there's no disguising the tension felt by everyone as the moment of takeoff arrives.
It is a piece of American history, very important, and it has to be treated as such with respect and a lot of care. We look at temperatures, pressures, leaks, anything like that. Is it making power? And just an overall shakedown of the airplane. We expect to fly 30 minutes the first time just to be sure that everything's working correctly. We'd like to get 3 flights on it today, but daylight may be an issue later.
This was the airplane, the very airplane that led the raid. And I'm so proud of our organization, the Commemorative Air Force, that we've been able to bring it to this place. There's a lot of work to do, a lot of money that's got to be raised, a lot of volunteer work that's got to be done. You know, this is the beginning, not the end. As you can see, she needs a paint job. All the interior fitments need to be done. And the volunteers back at Centex Wing and San Marcos are going to get to work on that just as soon as we get it out of here, and look forward to having, you know, the queen of the C-47 fleet as a member of the CAF.
After being in the air for 20 minutes, all happily without incident, That's All Brother successfully completes her maiden flight and returns for the necessary and thorough ground checks that follow.
It's a magnificent flight. Great airplane. We have a winner here.
He only had one job, and that was not to let me screw up, and he did his job. Flying a DC-3 is like putting on an old pair of Tony Lamas. They fit good. And you know, I've been flying this airplane, you know, C-47 DC-3s for 32 years, and it's always a great thrill to get back in one, and this one especially. On behalf of the Commemorative Air Force, I'd like to give a big thank you to all the employees at Basler. You guys have done a great job. It's been a real thrill for me to watch your team get behind and get engaged and get excited about this project. This is a big story, and you guys have played a pivotal role in it. And to the folks at the Centex Wing who were instrumental in raising this money and getting behind this project. You know, and this airplane is going to lead you to a new place. And to the thousands of men who bailed out of C-47s and walked on the beach in Normandy on June 6th of 1944, hear, hear.
Here, 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 here.
That's All Brother began the vital events of D-Day, and D-Day itself was to become the beginning of the end as far as World War II was concerned. It was the day on which troops of the Allied forces landed in Normandy, kick-starting the liberation of important cities and strategic ports and towns throughout northern France. It wasn't by any means the last mission for That's All Brother, who was to complete many more before the war finally ended, but it was by far her most significant. Her time at Basler now completed, That's All Brother is flown well over 1,000 miles from Wisconsin to the central Texas wing of the CAF in San Marcos. The crew at Centex eagerly await the arrival of their new star, aware of her historical importance and their role in helping to preserve her heritage.
We're excited to have That's All Brother back here in Texas. She's flying great. I mean, overall, she flies like a dream. Everyone who's flown a lot of C-47s who's had the opportunity to fly this one will claim that it's like it's a brand new airplane. So, as with any plane, especially one that's nearly 75 years old, there's always a couple things we got to work out. We have a little bit of oil we're working on, oil leakage we're working on the left engine, and we're working with the engine overhauler to address all that. Well, as you can see, if you look up here, there's some of these tubes, and one of these tubes comes from the blower section of the engine. And every time we're shutting the engine down, you can kind of see all these drops down here that get scattered about. That just means that when it was dripping, the wind was blowing. But sometimes it'll make a tight puddle. Sometimes it'll leave oil in drops like that. But that's something we really want to look at. It's not a tremendous amount of oil or quantity of oil that keeps us from being able to fly safely. But the big challenge is every time we go somewhere and park on their ramp, we kind of leave maybe an unwelcome present for them. So we'd like to get that addressed to be a little bit more professional in how we arrive and work with the venues we go to. We're fortunate to have just lined up a paint supplier. Polyfiber is going to be donating all the paint, and we also have the paint labor lined up as well, which will be done here in Texas, which we're really excited about. And we're also working with the Air Corps folks up in Minnesota, and they are the foremost experts on the very detailed lettering and insignia that would be on the plane. They go through all of the tech orders and manuals from the airplane and come up with exactly every last letter. So they'll be making over 300 masks and placing them on the airplane as part of the paint process, so that we have an extremely authentic C-47 both on the inside and out.
I think probably the thing I'm most excited to see happen with the project is going to actually happen in the next few months. For me, and my perspective as a historian, what we have now is a mechanically sound airplane that's structurally been tested, proven, but we still don't have our complete historic interior in the airplane. We've been quietly sourcing parts over the last 18 months to stock the airplane with its correct vintage radios, with the correct drinking fountain for the paratroopers. Everything down to the smallest detail, including the lavatory, are facets of the restoration that remain to be completed and made functional. Much of that work is going to be done by volunteers in the Tulsa area, which is where the airplane was originally accepted for service in the spring of 1944 by the U.S. Army Air Forces. Following the restoration, and what we're calling phase 2 of the restoration, the historic interior, we'll also have to paint the airplane. The invasion stripes, another characteristic marking that'll be on the airplane, is something else we're looking forward to because we intend to put them back on the way they were applied during World War II. The men of the 87th Troop Carrier Squadron found out on a Sunday that they had to paint all of their airplanes with these invasion stripes before the mission. And having not enough white and black paint on the base, they decided to break into local English hardware stores, take the black and white paint, leaving IOU notes for the shopkeeps, going back to the field and painting the airplanes with mops.
Clearly the stripes were there for a purpose, but what was it? And why now? The basis for the story starts at Greenham Common, from where That's All Brother took off on D-Day and where she and many other aircraft were given their invasion stripes.
Approaching June the 5th, an order was issued to paint invasion stripes on the aircraft because the Allies had learned from the parachute drops in Sicily. Many aircraft had been destroyed by friendly fire. Army and Navy gunners were not good at aircraft recognition, and to help them, big, bold, black and white stripes were hastily added to the aircraft as an identification aid so they wouldn't be suffering friendly fire when they flew over the invasion fleet. Now, of course, we recognize from the photographs, these are iconic symbols of the invasion, the black and white stripes. They date that critical moment in history. Unpainted, it wasn't D-Day. Painted, it was D-Day.
Overnight, the ships blossomed out in their new war paint. On D-2, invasion markings were applied. Another lesson from Sicily.
The aircraft were prepared, the lead plane chosen, but she needed an experienced pilot, one to offer the leadership required for this crucial mission. John Manolin Donaldson, the man selected to pilot That's All Brother, was an inspired and inspiring choice. He was born in 1901 in Alabama. He joined the Alabama Air National Guard and swiftly rose to the rank of base commander, a role he performed at several US AAF bases across America. He was subsequently promoted to commander of the 438th Troop Carrier Group, training in Northern California prior to departing for England. He had shown in training great precision in group formation flying and, critically, the accuracy of dropping paratroops. Less certain is quite why he changed from his original squadron, flying anti-submarine patrols, to flying C-47s instead.
Donaldson's a really interesting character. He actually became a pilot in 1924. So he's a pioneer in aviation, and that's really the mystery that remains today, is why did he go to C-47s? And I just don't know. I have a theory because early in the war, my squadron flew anti-submarine patrols off the coast of Miami in unarmed O-47s. And so I don't know if he just didn't like that and he wanted to be more involved, or if they saw, hey, this is a pilot with almost 20 years of flying experience, when there's very few pilots out there that have that much flight experience. And here we are, we're needing to boost the the troop carrier levels and stuff, so we need an experienced pilot to be able to not only train these guys but lead them. And so I don't know if it's that, I don't know what it is, but yeah, he's a fascinating guy. Flew tons of different airplanes, and after the war came back, reestablished my squadron back to state control for the state of Alabama, and retired as a major general. Well, I had the opportunity to meet his daughter actually before she passed away, and right after I found the airplane in 2007. We thought that it was Belle of Birmingham, because newspapers at the time say Belle of Birmingham. General Lewis Brereton, commander of the 9th Air Force, his journal, which I have a copy of, it listed as Belle of Birmingham. And yeah, that's because Donaldson and Daniel normally flew Belle of Birmingham. They were both from the same hometown. We later found out Belle of Birmingham was likely Daniel's plane. We can't confirm that. It may have been Donaldson's, but we don't know.
So how come Belle of Birmingham didn't lead the mission? One likely reason lies in the requirement for radar being fitted to the C-47s, which necessitated a hole being cut in the bottom of the fuselage. It may be that Donaldson was wary of Belle of Birmingham undergoing this surgery. So a recently arrived C-47 was selected and subsequently named.
Donaldson's daughter is the one that told me, yes. He didn't want to cut the holes in Belle of Birmingham, and so he got this new one, and he's the one that named the airplane That's All Brother. And yes, there's a song at the time. A lot of people have said it's named after the song. According to her, it's not. According to her, it was a message to Hitler, just like the end of Looney Tunes where Porky Pig says, "That's all, folks." That's all, brother. And that's the other thing that's sort of intriguing to me as someone from Alabama, because that's, sort of a Southern thing of if you're leaving somewhere, hey, see you later, brother, or hey, brother, how's it going, and something like that. And so it's a term of endearment, but it can also be, as we famously do in the South, politely put you down. And so to say that as he would have said it, or anybody from Alabama, like, that's all, brother. You're done. In other words, go away. You're no longer welcome here. And so I personally, I like that as a Southern, as an Alabamian. I like the sort of Southern connection there, that he kind of puts in a little Southern slang to name the airplane. So yeah.
We had been working with L3 Aerospace Technologies for a number of months. We took the airplane to them a couple of weeks ago on a visit, a meet and greet visit, and left with, when are you going to bring it back to get painted? Can it be here next Thursday? And so we shuffled the schedule around, got the paint, got the airplane to Waco, and they started work on it. And within about a week they had the aircraft stripped, and a week later they had it painted. And flew her home, and she looks fantastic. We tried to get as many of the details correct as we could. I mean, our source material are grainy, black and white photographs and technical orders, that were written in 1943 and 1944. Air Corps went through all of those and did their best to come up with the color specifications and marking placements for all the detail on the airplanes. And then, of course, the big one, which was the detail on the invasion stripes. And the story is those stripes, they weren't masked, they were painted on with mops and brushes. And so our goal was to kind of honor that history. And so at L3, we actually had them paint the stripes on by hand without masks. So the lines aren't perfectly straight. Nothing is perfect. If you get close and look, you'll notice the detail is much like it would have looked again on June 6, 1944. So we got what we were going for.
Resplendent in her new paint and sporting her authentic invasion stripes, That's All Brother is beginning to look very much the part. However, a few elements are still missing, including one important one, the radar system.
Hey, this is Joe Ensminger. I'm with That's All Brother in San Marcos, Texas. And How are you? I was given your contact information because I was told you may have a very specific piece of equipment we're looking for to complete the restoration of That's All Brother. That's right. So we're looking for the radome for the SCR-717 radar that was on That's All Brother on D-Day. And they're pretty tough to find, and we heard you might have something that might work. Okay. Well, two is definitely better than one. What kind of condition are they in? Right. Well, we'll definitely measure it, but the good news is that it's not something we're going to fly with, so it would be for static display only. So as long as we can kind of fit it up correctly and make it look right, that'll be great. Well, I think that's fantastic news. I mean, this is something that we've been searching for. It's in all the photographs. It was on the airplane when it flew on D-Day, and so I think it'd be a great addition to be able to have something like that. So I feel like we're pretty lucky we were able to hook up with you, and we'll definitely try to get a crew out to visit you to take a look at it and see if we can make it work. All right. Well, that's fantastic. We'll be in touch, and again, we appreciate it. This is exciting news for us.
With the CAF team fully occupied in the States, UK-based historian Ian McLachlan volunteered to visit Flixton Museum to get the necessary measurements.
Ian, I'm really pleased to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
I understand that you've spoken to the CAF.
Yes, Joe rang me a while ago.
Oh, Joe Ensminger.
That's right,
and
yes.
You've got something here that they're really excited about.
Which I can now show you.
Oh, great. Come on, let's have a look.
Behind an F100 canopy.
The things we do for That's All Brother, eh?
Shall I put down?
Here she goes. Very gently. Well, it's seen better days, that's for sure. I mean, you could say it's like a whacking great dinosaur egg, but it's fragile. Yet when it was built, it had to withstand the temperatures at altitudes of 25,000 feet. It would have to withstand the contractions and the temperatures there at minus 40 or 50 degrees. But this certainly wouldn't take much by way of damage from shrapnel and flak and stuff like that. And what's it made of? When we were filming at Cambridge recently, we were looking at drop tanks. Bowater and Spicer Cowan made the very early drop tanks. And it was a sort of paper mache composite.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this and I'm sort of thinking, well, I'm no plastics expert, but it doesn't look like fiberglass. But could it be the same sort of stuff they made the early drop tanks from?
I'm wondering that as well, because where it's actually broken, you can almost see two layers. But like you, I don't think it's fiberglass.
Yeah. You can't see anything on the inside that says made by whoever may have made this thing. And normally, you'll find a serial number or an ID plate on it somewhere, but nothing.
The radar dome, or radome, was fitted to the underside of an aircraft to protect the radar equipment from the elements, experiencing not only very considerable wind resistance, but huge differences in ambient temperature. On D-Day, only the Pathfinder and lead planes were fitted with radar. The others had to follow in order successfully to reach their drop zones. For them, therefore, visibility was a key factor.
Well, we had airplanes that were about $100,000 value with $500,000 worth of radar in them. Radar, altimeter, PPI scope, which the B-17s used on a different deal, but we used it for low-level mapping. Canals, pick up high tension lines, roads, separate trees from grass. Unbelievable. Carl Jones is my navigator on Angel Eyes, my C-47. So we always knew where we were. Or he did. And he would tell me.
Technology was leaping ahead, leaps and bounds during the Second World War. And the British, having had a fairly disastrous campaign of bombing, trying to find targets, had developed ground imaging radar called H2S. The Americans, with their greater production capacity, took it over, and it was called H2X. And it could distinguish fairly clearly major cities and features in major cities, but very good for imaging the difference between land and sea. Now, ASV, air-to-surface vessel radar, anti-submarine radar of various species, including the SCR-717, fitted to That's All Brother, seems to have been an attempt to give you a clearer radar image to support the Eureka ground module and the Rebecca air module already fitted to That's All Brother, which would guide the aircraft into a position within a couple of miles of the DZ, the drop zone. But this, out in the slipstream on a C-47, would have given you fairly uncomfortable aerodynamics, quite apart from the already well-laden aircraft on its way to the Cotentin Peninsula. Donaldson, the pilot, after his flying in That's All Brother, he reverted to the Belle of Birmingham, which did not have this fitted and had, in his opinion, far better flying characteristics without this corrupting the airflow.
For this very reason, modern flying regulations would not permit That's All Brother to take to the air with a radome. Nonetheless, the CAF wished to create a replica housing in order to add authenticity when the plane is on display on the ground. For this, accurate measurements are required.
I think it's the same as the one in the museum. Proper. Here we are, what have we got here? We've got 110 inches, correct, which translates into whatever that is in
2.8.
2.8.
Significantly, the other element still missing from the freshly painted plane is the all-important nose art. Back at Centex, the attention to detail is exhaustive. The drive to replicate the original art takes both time and skill.
The only thing I can think is, if anything, some of the letters up top might need individually twisting, but I think this is looking pretty sweet.
I started painting nose art in 2007 when I was given the opportunity to work with the CAF on their B-24 project. Painting nose art on vintage aircraft is extremely rewarding for me because I grew up going to air shows with my dad and my uncle, both in the Air Force. I really became obsessed with the history, full in around 2000, 1999, 2000. Just that whole era has become so important to me. And so to see like this plane when it's done on the ramp and flying and in the magazines, it'll be pretty special to know that I had a piece of all the people working together on this plane to bring it back to what it is today. And it's such a historic plane, it's really an honor. We made sure the lettering was correct. I drew it all up on the computer based on the historic photos, and we made little tweaks and adjustments, projected it on the plane to get it in the right location based on the historic photos. And even from there, up on the scaffold, we were making adjustments to the individual letters to try and get it as close as we could to being the accurate nose art that it wore in 1944. And once we got it drawn onto the plane, I started painting in the yellow, then switched sides, did it all over again. And what's unique about this aircraft is we have photos of both sides. A lot of times you would only get a photo of one side when you're doing your research. So we're really fortunate in that respect. It takes a lot longer than people would think. You have to do your brush strokes, smooth everything out, and a lot of the times the colors may not take on the first go through, so you have to do a second coat. And then there's the lead time for the drying. It's a time-consuming process. Everybody here has been really nice, really helpful, wanting to make my job as easy as possible, and that's really nice. It helps me feel confident and relaxed and be able to put out a quality product that they'll be happy with. But just the opportunity in general to work on such a historic aircraft is amazing, and it's special.
As the details fall into place, thoughts now turn to the practicalities of her anniversary mission back to France. The route is confirmed, but what support will she and her sister aircraft require while they are away?
It's been 74 years since D-Day, and there are not a lot of people alive today that actually remember it being there. That were actually part of D-Day. There are a lot of people that have heard stories, but as time passes, those memories fade. And what's cool about this project to me is that it's almost a rebirth in some ways of a D-Day veteran. So we're taking something that was old and forgotten, and we're bringing it back to life and making it real again. And we're taking it back to where it had its greatest challenge and its greatest accomplishments. Going to Normandy in 2019 is kind of the ultimate goal of this whole project. To get there is pretty challenging. I mean, it's challenging operationally. We have to cross the Atlantic twice. We're going to be operating a long way away from our support system for a long time. We're planning on being over there from anywhere from 2 to 3 months. And then we've decided as an organization, the Commemorative Air Force has, that we're going to send 3 airplanes over. So we're sending this airplane, obviously that's all brother, is the lead airplane, and then 2 other airplanes that belong to the CAF, D-Day Doll and Bluebonnet Bell are going to join us. So we've got to be prepared for any contingency. We obviously don't want to get the airplane stuck overseas for any length of time, and so we want to make sure that we have a spares kit, and that includes spare engines. And engines for this airplane are $70,000, but we need to know that if we're over there and something happens to one of the engines, that it's just labor to get it removed and replaced and get the airplane operational again. The engine's the big spares item, but there's hundreds of other things that we have to make sure we have put together: tires, all kinds of consumables, spare radios, those types of things. The trip across the Atlantic and back and operating in Europe, it is daunting, but at the same time, airplanes like this flew across the Atlantic hundreds and thousands of times, in 1944. And this airplane is as close to brand new as you can get a C-47 right now. So I don't think anybody's worried about, the hazards of crossing. But we do worry about the logistics, and we want to make sure we're prepared, and we don't have something happen that gets us stuck somewhere. Well, we are going to take the shortest possible route, but it's a lot of stops. And so the Great Circle route, you know, we're going to leave out of here, travel to the northeast Connecticut, and then go to Newfoundland, Greenland, Iceland, and then over to the UK, with all those being stops. And you know, we'll have to get fuel on the trip. You know, when you fly American Airlines or British Airways, you know, over, you're flying at 530 miles an hour. We'll be doing, if we're lucky, 130 miles an hour. So it's going to be a long trip. There's not going to be another 75th anniversary of D-Day, and frankly, unfortunately, there are not going to be a lot of opportunities to have living D-Day veterans participate and be able to actually see this airplane back there. But I do think we can rebirth their memories, so to speak. We can kind of reignite interest in what they did and the sacrifices they made, and this airplane will just be a vehicle for us to do that.
Oshkosh Air Show 2018. After great diligence and research, undertaken in particular by Matt Scales, the CAF have located many relatives of those who flew in That's All Brother in wartime. To mark her official relaunch, the families have been invited not only to see the plane for the first time, but to participate in an emotional memorial flight.
My dad was a piece of history, and we didn't really even know about it until about 3 years ago when we found all his photographs and his medals. I mean, we knew he was in the war, but he really didn't talk about it. And when we would ask questions, he would just say, well, I was in the war. He just briefly would say, oh, I went on leave to England, I went to France, but other than that, he really didn't seem to want to talk about it.
Officer was squadron navigator while overseas, flying in lead position in combat missions. Participated in the paratroop and glider drop invasions of Normandy, southern France, Wesel, Germany, and Holland. Has flown as navigator on flights using dead reckoning, pilotage, radio, celestial, and radar navigation.
One of the few things he said was, you know, basically, I was a navigator. And the story ended at that point. So, you know, being a kid, I says, okay, well, that's, I guess that's what we did. But I mean, and he never went into it in much detail. He did a little more so with my sister, I think, in his latter years. But we, strangely enough, we knew very little about his service. And it was not until my mother passed away that my sister and I were looking through a lot of the old war memorabilia and what have you, and we started piecing together, you know, his involvement in the war. And we had, you know, photographs of him in the regular airplane that he flew on, which was the Belle of Birmingham. And strangely enough, about 2.5 years ago, my company got hold of me and said, we've got an odd email that we received addressed to you, and it's some Air Force historian, and it's referencing somebody named John Shallcross. So I said, well, send it on over, we'll take a look at it. And ends up that gentleman who had tried to get hold of me, God knows how he was able to do so, his name was Matt Scales, and he's an Air Force historian. And he went on, we'd been corresponding back and forth for some time, and he says, well, you know, your father was the navigator on the lead plane, That's All Brother. And I said, no, I think you're mistaken. He was on the Belle of Birmingham. And he says, well, yes, he was, but, and then went into the whole story about this. And at that point in time, it started making a little more sense, what with all the photographs and looking through his war records and medals and stuff like that, the picture started coming together a little more.
You know, the World War II generation is, you know, largely gone now. And, you know, I guess we probably have maybe 10, 15 years at the most until the very last one passes away. And so the airplane will be all that's left to tell the story. And you take it a step further, and those family members, there's many people that come to air shows like Oshkosh, and they walk up to these B-25s or P-51s or whatever, and they say, that's the kind of airplane your father flew or your grandfather flew or whoever. And very few people in this world can go to an airplane and say that's the airplane that your actual relative flew, or in this case, that's all brother jumped from. And those individuals can, and all of them, all of the crew members and paratroopers have long since passed away. The last one passed away in 2009. It's almost 10 years ago now. And so for them to have a physical connection to their family member just means the world to me. I've gotten way too much credit, way too much notoriety in all this whole process, and it's don't get me wrong, it's fun and that's nice. But truly, honestly, the biggest thing for me is being able to connect those families.
Matt and I started working on this in 2007, and here it is 2018 and it's flying, and we've been able to meet the wing that's flying it, being able to meet the ones who restored it, the CAF staff that helped with the fundraising, the families of the crew, the families of the paratroopers who jumped. Matt has done most of the research on who the paratroopers were. There is no manifest, so we do not know the entire number that were on the plane. We don't know if it was 13, 14, or 15, somewhere in that area. So we've reached out to those that we do know, and some of those descendants now know each other, and they have gotten together, and they actually came here to Oshkosh in 2018, and they were able to fly together as families on the, I guess, the maiden flight for the families. And also Matt and I, because of our roles in it, we were able to go on that flight also, and it was very emotional for the families to know that it's the same plane that their ancestor either flew or was a crew member of or jumped out of on D-Day, and it was pretty emotional for all of us.
We're going to be up for about 30 minutes, and what we're going to do is, once we're airborne and cruising at a level altitude, I'm going to give you a signal to disconnect your seat belts. You can walk up to the cabin or the cockpit. If you do that, would you just please? No, we've got 13 people to get through. Get through that as fast as you can. Maybe we can do a second one. Anybody that's going in the back, no more than 2 in the back at a time. And when you sit back down, please put the seat belts on in case we have a bump or something, okay? Now, when we get up there, we get everybody seat belted in, then I'll give you where the emergency exits are located, how to get out if we have an incident. We probably won't, but we want to make sure everybody understands where to get out, just like we do in the airlines. And we're going to have a good flight. I believe Tom Travis is going to tell you how and where we're going to go. I'm just going to turn him over to him.
We're going to take off, go south, go right over the top of Oshkosh. And so get your cameras ready. It's a magnificent sight today. Lots of airplanes, lots of activity. And so we'll go down south of Oshkosh, turn around and come back. We're about 2,000 feet above the ground. So you should be able to get some good photos. We appreciate you flying with us again, and welcome aboard.
He wants to do, so we can work that out.
Matt, Scales, and I started this in 2007, and of course we initially wanted to get the plane saved. That was the initial effort, trying to find someone to save this plane, and Commemorative Air Force are the only ones that stepped up.
I would have never imagined in a million years that we'd ever be sitting in this airplane exactly like it was, flying. At this point, I don't think it's emotional anymore. It's almost just funny, really. It's like, I can't believe it. How could we? I would have never imagined we'd ever get here, but here we are.
Right on the other side of this wall would have been where my father was sitting. And it's just a neat feeling to be that close to him.
military flying, my civilian flying, I've flown a lot of airplanes and a lot of time in the air, and this is definitely the most special flight I've ever been a part of, that's for sure. And again, all because of the family members. All goes back to them.
Very smooth flight, beautiful restoration job. Engines purred like kittens. It was incredible. They've done a fantastic job restoring this airplane. So well worthy of the effort for 11 years now on this project.
It was very emotional for me to be on the plane today, and I actually sat down where he was sitting when we were flying, and it was very emotional for me. I broke down, and just to know that he was sitting there so long ago in that exact spot was a phenomenal feeling.
It was a culmination of something that both my sister and I have been waiting to do for a while. Of course, we donated to the cause starting 2.5 years ago, and have been keeping up on the restoration of the aircraft ever since. And we were told 3.5 weeks ago, oh, by the way, if you'd like to come out to Oshkosh, we got this big thing going on. And so we scrambled and got everything together, because we wouldn't have missed it for the world. And going up in the plane today and being able to sit in my dad's navigation chair and just imagine what it would have been like for those guys was just fantastic.
Following the success of the flight, and to round off the official relaunch, an event is held in the evening to which relatives, friends and supporters are invited and celebrated. However, for the CAF, it is a bittersweet moment.
On behalf of the entire organization, I am so glad that you are here tonight. Now, next is just a really special treat tonight to have the family members of the crew and the paratroopers for That's All Brother. They have special guests and ribbons as well. If you are a family member of a paratrooper or a crew member of TAB, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to take just a moment to talk about a very serious situation that many of you have heard about. The mission to Normandy was planned to have 3 CAF aircraft make the historic journey across the Atlantic. As all of you know, Bluebonnet Bell had an accident on takeoff Saturday morning. I'm sure you share my thankfulness that all of the occupants were able to exit the aircraft successfully. It is with great sadness to share that the Bluebonnet Bell is destroyed. I will never forget even my own personal memories of crewing on the aircraft during the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. The loss of the aircraft is no doubt heartbreaking, and I've spoken with the crew, and I'm happy to share that all are recovering from the accident. Mark Davis, the squadron leader, sends his regrets on not being able to join us tonight, and that the Highland Lakes Squadron will not be able to participate in the mission to Normandy next year. The loss of this particular aircraft is a reminder to all of us of the dwindling numbers of these historic aircraft, that we must honor and tell the stories of those who served in World War II. And this makes tonight all the more important.
As if the loss of Bluebonnet Bell were not enough of a setback for the CAF, there is soon further bad news. Potentially, given all that is at stake, worse news. The problem with the oil leak on That's All Brother's left engine has escalated considerably after the extra hours of flying time, and consequently the engine urgently needs attention. The plane is returned to Basler turbo conversions and the engine is removed. While the complex maintenance is carried out, That's All Brother remains grounded and crippled in her hangar. The date with destiny in France in June 2019 cannot be changed. But now the fears grow that she won't make it at all. June 1944. The Second World War had reached a critical moment. The only way to stop Hitler in his tracks and to reclaim lost territory was to launch the largest seaborne invasion in history, the moment that became known as D-Day.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
The D-Day invasion was spearheaded by paratroopers. Leaping into the unknown, their job was to prevent enemy reinforcements. Without their actions, Allied victory in the West would not have been possible.
I have to tell you, everybody says we're heroes, and that isn't true. We volunteered to do this, we trained to do it, and we were paid to do it. That does not make you a hero.
There could have been no spearhead and no paratroopers without the workhorses of the sky, the Douglas C-47s, the airplanes that flew in their hundreds across the English Channel to Normandy. Charged with delivering the airborne divisions to their rendezvous with destiny, one airplane had to lead the way.
It seemed totally beyond comprehension that the airplane that led the D-Day invasion, this incredibly important artifact, would be in a scrapyard. There's just no way that that can be true.
I just had a feeling there's something special about this airplane. And he said, well, that airplane was the lead plane into Normandy.
This is the story of the men who found and who were determined to restore this iconic aircraft, of the plane's part in one defining moment in history, and of a dream that she should fly again back to the coast of France to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That's All Brother, the plane that led the D-Day invasion. Continuing the story of That's All Brother from her discovery and early stage restoration to the success of her first flight. She was installed at her new home at Centex. Dedicated teams completed her interior fittings and exterior paintwork, including the faithful reproduction of her nose art. Relatives of the former crew and paratroopers took part in an emotional relaunch at Oshkosh Airshow. There was distressing news of the sudden demise of her sister aircraft, Bluebonnet Bell, and renewed concerns that an oil leak in That's All Brother's left engine had become noticeably worse. Now the pressure to return That's All Brother to France is beginning to mount significantly. After so many long days, weeks and months, the horizon of Normandy is finally coming into view. As the work on That's All Brother's stricken engine continues, the CAF are reminded that such occurrences were not uncommon during wartime. Many new C-47s had similar engine problems before they reached the combat theatre. Pathfinder pilot David Hamilton recalls one such event in North Africa.
Going overseas, we flew the southern route, and I came up and lost an engine trying to get through the pass in Marrakesh. So I went to Agadir on the coast of Morocco, figuring, oh, they'll send an engine down when we notify them from the air material up at Casablanca. Homestead Field, Florida, they sent the engine. It took me 10 days to get to me. My crew chief, my radio operator, my co-pilot and I, and two guys from the PBY Naval School, because same engine in a PBY. We changed the engine, got it to work fine. I eventually got in, checked into Casablanca to air material because I had to have it cleared. And Bob Hoover was the captain, clearance officer. And he said, is the airplane flying fine? I said, yes, just going great, no problem. He said, sign here, boom, have a good trip. And I went to England.
The engine suppliers and the team at Basler had been hard at work. To everyone's great relief, the engine repair was completed successfully, and once again, the Pratt & Whitney power plant was reunited with That's All Brother. The process requires great patience as well as skill. the team take all the time required to carefully position and reattach the repaired engine. It is vital to keep to the schedule and to ensure the success of her mission that this all goes according to plan.
You're looking exactly the same.
Central to the events that led up to D-Day and to events marking the 75th anniversary, Greenham Common stands as witness to all that went before.
Greenham Common, England. When Eisenhower arrived here on June the 5th, 1944, he had with him a retinue of press corps, the media. He had made a famous uplifting speech for the morale of the men. But Eisenhower had the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he knew beyond that morale-boosting speech, everything might fail. In the event of it going disastrously wrong, Eisenhower had prepared a letter to be issued accepting full responsibility for the failure of D-Day. Happily, that version of history did not happen. Not far from where I'm standing stood That's All Brother. Donaldson and Daniel were doing their pre-flight checks. The aircraft had been readied by the ground crew, working hard to make sure everything was as prepared as it could be for the vital mission being flown that night. The men were anxiously waiting to board. They wanted to get on and get it over with. They knew they were going into combat and they had been waiting and preparing for hours. Last letters home, checking the pouches, sharpening the bayonets once more, and getting the haircuts, the Mohican haircuts, competing with one another for those blackened faces with red or white stripes. Who could look the most ghoulish? And then waiting to take off as the sun set on June the 5th, 1944.
The history and importance of Greenham Common is not lost on the CAF team as they too come to see where the events of D-Day began.
Well, right now we're headed out to Greenham Common, and this is where That's All Brother and the rest of the 438 launched from on the night of D-Day. And it's interesting to see the countryside. It's very pretty, rolling hills here, and it had to be a lot different for all the people who were serving over here. Coming from various places across the U.S. Donaldson came from Birmingham, and other members of the crew from Alabama as well. And it must have just been, quite a shock to come to such a different place to do, such an important task.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Great to meet you. Chris Bolton.
Andy Mag, nice to meet you.
Jim Lash. Hello, Jim. Hi, good to meet you.
Joe Ensminger.
Great to meet you, Joe. Hi, great to meet you. Well, welcome to Greenham Control Tower. So it's recently been refurbished. It fell into a state of disrepair from when the airbase was sort of became unoperational. And over a period of years, a lot of people put together a campaign to restore it. As Greenham Trust, we gave £250,000 towards restoration. It's about £1 million project. So we'll go and take a walk inside.
Oh, that would be great.
Here we are. Lovely to see you here. Welcome. This is where it all happened. This is where the air controllers sat and guided in the planes. The building wasn't in fact used very much because in the Cold War era there weren't really that many planes. They were just constantly on alert, and the planes arrived in 90-day cycles.
Right.
So often it was empty.
Obviously the Gamma site, the former missile silos, you can see there now.
Young people here they don't know anything about the airbase. They don't know it was an airbase either.
Sure, right.
Yeah, there's no real connection because you go and talk to local groups of school children. Of course, they don't know what the Cold War was even.
No.
Right. No, it's great when you can preserve history in a way that is accessible to the community and people will use.
Well, we're out on Greenham Common. We're kind of walking toward the runways, and this used to be a SAC base, but before it was that, it was a base that was used by the U.S. Army Air Corps in 1944. And so we're going to kind of walk to the middle here, where there's a little pad of concrete from the old concrete runway.
Yep.
But where that lies is also where the grass runways intersected. There were 3 runways here in 1944. So we're just going to go take a look at it and see what it looks like.
Well, it's neat to think that, almost 75 years ago, the plane we operate today is, took off right from here and to, go off to such an important mission.
And not only that's all brother, but how many other C-47s left here that same morning?
Yeah, I mean, it was at least 50 took off from this base, and they actually took off from many different bases and then formed up a little ways away from here. But all told, it was over 800 C-47s involved in the main paratroop drop.
I bet it would have been something to see.
That would have been pretty neat to see. Well, yeah, I mean, if you look around here, if you were here in 1944, not only would you have, had the runways and the base and all the facilities there, but there would have been so many aircraft here just off to the sides between C-47s, CG-4s, Horsa gliders as well. It was, quite an operation, because after the airborne invasion, they ran another nighttime glider mission, and then the next day they ran even more glider missions as well from here.
I mean, for me, it's always just it's an opportunity to put yourselves in the shoes of an 18-year-old kid or a 21-year-old pilot, I always think about sort of the courage to keep taking another step forward into the aircraft. That had to be a pretty big thing for them. And so every time I'm at one of these places, it kind of brings you a little closer to that, and you realize, wow, that was a huge thing that those soldiers did for us.
And what we get to do is a luxury, and what they did was a necessity, and it was a very risky business, and many aircraft were lost and many lives were lost on D-Day.
Yeah, so I think that's the primary thing, is it's not really fun is not the word. I mean, this is an honor to be able to do this.
Yeah.
But you always have to be respectful of what it really was. I mean, it was men going off to fight a war.
Yep.
Many of them going off.
And not coming back.
So.
But because of what they did,
we're standing here.
We're standing here. And, we get to do the things we do today, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude.
Just as the CAF are paying a poignant visit to Greenham Common to pay their respects, Matt and Ken in Alabama find an appropriate moment to pay their respects too, this time at the grave of the man who played such a crucial part.
This whole story starts with him. If it hadn't been for him, we wouldn't have found the airplane. We never set out to find the airplane. It was strictly researching his life, so it all goes back to him. He kind of goes away in the 60s. He retires. Especially at that point, not a whole lot of people want to hear about war at all, much less, at that time he's a major general. And so, no, he just, one of those stories that kind of fades away. And I don't know, hopefully with the airplane being restored and coming back here to Alabama in a couple of months, maybe that'll kind of renew the interest in it. But no, very few know about it. And I'm sure if they did, obviously they'd be proud to have a native son being in such an important part of history. I think Ken and I would both agree the day we talked, we'd like to see it restored to the way it was the day it flew on D-Day and let it continue flying. That's happened. So, I think our greatest hopes have already been realized. I mean, I don't think we would have even thought about taking it back to France. And so the fact that it's going back to Normandy and flying over the exact same route that it flew before, dropping paratroopers again. That's all icing on the cake as far as I'm concerned.
The CAF have returned home with a heightened sense of their mission. As we learned before, the trip across the Atlantic cannot be undertaken without a significant number of spares. Not least of these is a minimum of one backup engine.
What we've had arrive here is a spare engine for our C-47, an 1830-92 that's been overhauled. And that'll get us through any problems that we've got of any engines. Came from Idaho, Anderson Aeromotive. I've got to take a look and make sure that everything looks like it's undamaged and everything's there. So let's take a look and see what they sent us. That's a pretty engine. This one is what we call an IRAN engine, inspect and repair as necessary, or replace as necessary. So it hasn't had a full overhaul, but it's a complete engine that's been built, is ready to run, and we can just bolt it on the plane and go if we need to. This would more likely be an emergency engine. If I had a problem in the field with the plane and I had to replace an engine, I can put this one on there and it will reliably get me back here where we can send the other engine off for overhaul and get the plane back where we can actually work on it. We're really kind of shaking it out right now with the test flying that we're doing. I say test flying. We're taking it to shows. Our pilots are getting qualified. We're putting hours on it. We've got about 50 hours on it since March when the plane was delivered to us. We're working hard, the CAF's working hard, and all of the vendors that are working with us, everybody's really pitching in to get this done just right.
The logistics are every bit as demanding as they are important. The CAF calls a meeting to refine the plans.
The airplane's going to start in San Marcos. We're flying to New Orleans, Lakeland, Florida, Birmingham, Alabama, Atlanta, and Dover, Delaware, and then we're going to end up in Oxford, Connecticut. And then from there, that's when the trip starts. And so on the 18th, we're going to go from Oxford to, I believe, Goose Bay, and then across to Narsarsuaq. I think that's how you pronounce that. And then to Reykjavik, and then across to Prestwick. And then we'll park in Prestwick for a week or so, and then move down to Duxford. We'll be doing a lot of airshow stuff at Duxford. It's actually a little short for our SOP, but we're gonna make an exception for it.
How long is it?
4,800 feet, I think. We're doing some flyovers of some strategic areas on the way. We crossed the channel. This is about a 2-hour flight, and we're going to be landing in Caen. Depart on the 18th of May, come back around the last week of June, and maybe the first week of July.
All the while in wartime France, the resistance had been on standby for many weeks, awaiting word of the forthcoming invasion. At last, D-Day was imminent.
The resistance were working with the Allies. Communication was going backwards and forwards across the channel, and the resistance were waiting for a particular message. And that message came on the evening of June the 5th, the second part of a message that told them the invasion was on. Immediately they started to disrupt German communications, telephone lines cut, telegraph poles destroyed, train tracks blown up, trains misdirected, anything to disrupt and prevent the Germans bringing through reinforcements to assist the Allies.
On Greenham Common, ahead of the invasion force, the very first wave was leaving the Pathfinder planes, carrying troops capable of setting up strategic radar beacons needed to guide the main wave to the predetermined drop zones. At long last, D-Day proper was underway.
We had a final briefing and relaxed, went through the sand tables again, the drop procedure. Then we slept and ate a little. And then we went out to the plains at around, I'd say maybe 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And then we took off, and 3 ship formations. The 101st took off first. They had a little further to go. And the 82nd planes, 9 of us, we took off later. The last 2 planes were the drop zones for the glider landing. There was a fog bank, unreported, over the drop area. And nobody broke radio silence to let us know. But amazingly, we stuck in formation. And drop zone T-Tear had 3 planes drop in there, and the drop was perfect. The flak was intense, but small arms. And I had lots of holes in my airplane, but mostly 25 caliber Schmeiser machine pistol, which will give you an idea of how low I was after I got rid of my troopers. Because I dropped my troopers starting at 800 feet, got down to about 680. Then they pulled in the static lines and I hit the deck. And we had to lift our right wing to go by the church steeple of St. Mary Glees. And the only 101st had 1 drop zone where the plane had to do a 360 and go back, but it eventually, every Pathfinder landed in his drop zone.
When the day came, every airbase in the southeast and beyond had a full part to play. The fighter squadrons of Mustangs, for example, providing cover and protection, as well as causing as much disruption as possible to enemy forces, were fully engaged.
This is Bottisham Airfield.
Yep.
So what units were based here?
This was the home to the 375th Fighter Squadron.
Of the 361st?
Fighter Group, yeah, flying Mustangs on D-Day. They were flying combat air patrols. They took off before dawn and landed after dusk, basically just stopping any enemy fighters getting through to the airborne forces. They didn't want the German fighters tangling with the Dakotas.
Oh, because they would have massacred them, wouldn't
yes,
they?
they would, yeah. So it's very important to provide that safety net.
So it was a shield. This was part of a big Allied shield then,
basically,
protecting the...
Eisenhower put all his fighter groups in an umbrella around the beaches to stop anything getting through.
And this is the actual room that the briefing occurred that morning. Yeah. So the tension here must have been palpable then as those young men came in, knowing that something really big was going down.
Yeah, I can't begin to imagine people sitting in this room learning the news that you're going to be landing in France and you're providing that umbrella and you're expected to be in the air nearly the whole day and land a Mustang at night. It must have been a fairly hectic day.
Where was the briefing screen then? Where was the stage?
It would have been huge. Basically, we've got a photograph of the squadron commander standing a couple of steps behind you. Big map of Europe on this wall here. He's got a pointer. He's showing the guys where the targets are, where their designated areas to fly. And there's a status board here on the wall behind you telling them what flights they're in, what machines they're flying that day. This is where they'd have learned what they were doing.
And here we're in the heart of East Anglia, and the skies would have been very, very congested on that morning then, I guess.
I can't begin to imagine it. Every fighter group was in the air, most bomber groups were in the air, and you've got Transport Command flying the airborne forces in. I mean, it must have been hectic.
Yes, I think from an historian's viewpoint, you can only imagine the sounds that must have been shaking this building that morning as the aircraft thundered out.
So if you can imagine 70 Mustangs starting up at once, the noise that must have made.
When did they put the stripes on the aircraft?
I think it was on the evening of the 5th.
So they were busy. So they would have seen all the hubbub going on of painting their beautiful, nicely polished Mustangs with these ghastly black and white stripes.
Yeah, and they were just quickly thrown on because they had to do 60, 70 aircraft in about 3 or 4 hours, so it wasn't a precision job.
Did they fly more than one mission that day?
They did. They flew 6 missions that day, yeah.
6 missions?
6 missions, yeah. They split the group up into 2 halves and they kept one group in the air all day.
God gracious. So did they have any engagements with enemy aircraft
They
that
certainly
day?
did, yes. They shot down, I think there was one claim destroyed, and they shot up quite a lot of tanks and enemy patrols.
Of course, trying to prevent enemy
Yes,
forces
basically.
getting through to the beaches.
Yeah.
So they were strafing anything?
Yeah, anything that moved, yeah.
In the closing minutes of June the 5th, the first wave of C-47s with the paratroopers aboard, led by That's All Brother and Donaldson, took off en route to Normandy. By now, though, the enemy forces were on full alert, and their passage over was anything but smooth.
Going across, it was, you could look down and see all those ships down there, and you realized that this was the largest armada of ships that anybody has ever seen. People have asked me if we were afraid. No, we were not afraid. There was a little apprehension because we'd never done this before, but that also worked in the fact that we weren't afraid because we didn't know we'd never done it. We didn't know how bad this was going to be. So we came close to the coast, then the clouds rolled in. We were flying in serials of 9 planes. The first plane in each serial was the only one that had a navigator. There was on the ground a thing called a Eureka. It would send a beam up to the plane. They had a Rebecca. There were those, in every area they had a guy on the ground with the Eureka, and you're supposed to home in on him. Well, what happened when they got into this cloud bank, we were flying almost propeller to tail. So the first thing they did, self-preservation, scatter, or we're going to wreck. In doing that, they lost the navigator. So the 8 planes behind him had no idea where they were because the navigator was gone. They were so certain because of the time element that they had flown that they were dropping people in the right place, and they were not. It was good and bad. It was bad because our plan fell apart. It was good because it confused the Germans. They just had no idea of how many people there were. All they knew was that every place they looked, there was paratroopers. And as far as actual fear, I stood in the door and looked out, and I felt no fear at the time, and I've talked to the other guys, and none of them have said the same thing. It was fascinating. You could see all of those heavy caliber tracers coming up. Every fifth shell that was coming up was a tracer, but it looked solid. They were hitting the planes next to us. There were planes blowing up. They were coming up through, hitting people in the plane. And we were so low that the ground fire from machine guns was coming up through the planes. And all we could think of then was, let's get out of here.
Despite the thickening fog banks and the associated challenges for the rudimentary radar, Donaldson found his way to the drop zone.
Well, studying the maps, we think we're now pretty much on the spot where That's All Brother deposited the paratroops on board her aircraft. She put, through Donaldson's courage, her men where they were meant to be. And that was the time, the green light and out. They were helpless. They feared as they leapt out of the aircraft and descended from the skies here that they would be machine gunned, and many were. In the darkness, they were trying to find one another. They had their little clickers. Was it somebody friendly? Hopefully you got a responding click. It would be one of your men. Then 1, 2, 3 others gathered. Around 75 of them made a textbook attack on Saint-Marie-de-Mont. They positioned machine guns to enfilade the enemy, and they went in, almost leapfrogging, building to building. And in a brief, fierce combat there, they took the church. And within hours, many objectives had been achieved, which made it possible then for the troops coming up from the beaches to proceed to some extent as planned. And through the night into the early hours of the morning, that bitter, vicious combat went on. But slowly but surely, the Americans gained the upper hand.
Our objective for my battalion, or my company, was 2 bridges near Brevans. One was a pedestrian bridge and one a vehicle bridge. Those were built a few months before we went over to funnel reinforcements down to the beach forces. That was critical that we had to stop that. We did take the bridges the first day.
The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were in action 33 and 24 days respectively. The 82nd, having captured Saint-Mère-Église and secured the bridgehead across the Mer de Ré River, destroyed other river crossings, protected the flank of the 7th Army Corps, and drove west to the Douve River. The 101st seized the areas assigned it, destroyed bridges, and drove on to Carentan to establish a defense area there.
We were supposed to be in there 3 days. That's what shock troops do. They are not defensive people ordinarily. But they had nobody else to put in. It was harder than they thought, so they decided to keep us in. We were in it for 33 days before we went back to England.
Dropping the paratroops and their part in preparing the way proved vital for the wave after wave of ground troops who landed amid such heavy fire on the beaches. Though many pilots had not found their predetermined drop zones, due in large part to the fog, the paratroops' role proved crucial in opening up lines through which the Allied forces could advance. As part of her preparations, That's All Brother regularly takes to the air, not least of all to put time on her freshly repaired engine. Today, she adds extra purpose to her flight, this time to Dayton, Ohio, to reconnect with a familiar face and one of the original paratroopers, Jim Pee Wee Martin.
Have a good flight. Be careful.
Today we are flying That's All Brother up to Dayton, Ohio to meet with Pee Wee Martin. Pee Wee was one of the original Toccoa band of brothers. He jumped on D-Day with 101st Airborne, and he actually jumped at the 70th anniversary of D-Day when he was 92 years old. He helped a lot in the initial fundraising and getting together for That's All Brother when we made the initial presentation and all. So we are taking That's All Brother to Dayton, Ohio today, and his family's going to bring him out here. We're hoping that he's going to be in good enough health that he's going to be able to get in and take a ride with us. We'll take he and his family for a ride in the airplane that he jumped, not the airplane, but the type of airplane that he jumped out of 75 years ago next month. On D-Day, there were 800 airplanes that took off, carrying paratroopers, carrying gliders, and they all followed this airplane. There are a lot of warbirds out there that are painted up like famous airplanes, but they're not really the airplane. This is the airframe that was that led everything at D-Day. This trip we're on today really provides us with a great opportunity to take the airplane on some very long legs, and we can validate our fuel burns and our oil consumption. And there's been a lot of things that have come up on this trip that have just been good pointers. And it's a little chilly today, so we're getting a little experience with how the airplane operates in the cold. Because, you know, in about 6 weeks, we're going to launch out to go across the North Atlantic on the same blue spruce routes that C-47s flew to Europe by the thousands in World War II. I think this airplane really has been a defining airplane for the CAF. You know, we've got 170 airplanes scattered all across the country, and you know, most of our airplanes never went overseas and don't have a lot of historical provenance. This airplane, hands down, is the most historically significant airplane that we have in the CAF fleet. And because of its historical significance, it allowed us the opportunity to raise money in a much more effective way than we typically are able to do. And that allowed us to bring this airplane up to an incredibly high standard in terms of restoration. So I really think that's something new and really exciting for the CAF.
On the approach to Dayton, it is clear that the weather is worsening. As That's All Brother comes into land, there's no disguising the onset of a snowstorm.
37 degrees, 2,500 snow, 45 visibility. Getting pretty marginal right there, but then it's clear.
3,000 overcast is what this shows.
Two concerns now are the temperature and visibility. Despite these, the crew are keen to put That's All Brother through her wintertime paces, with the upcoming Atlantic crossing very much in mind.
Hey, Pee-wee, how are you? Good. Good to see you.
Hello, sir. How are you? All right, very good. Oh, hung on. Wow. Here we go. Keep it up.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. Yes, I could have.
After a short but emotional flight, That's All Brother returns to the airfield and, with visibility mercifully improved, lands safely.
We have heard people over and over and over and say, "Thank you for your sacrifice." I have never considered my service a sacrifice. I have always considered it an honor and a privilege to have been a part of history. And I sincerely mean that, because I'm just a little guy, a country bumpkin, and all of a sudden I'm thrust in the limelight because I went to Normandy. See, and what's important now about all of this restoration and what you are doing right now is that we're going to be gone, and you're going to be the last people to have talked to somebody that's actually been there, and you're going to preserve that. You think about that. There is no glory in combat, believe me. There's no glory. There is afterwards, but not while you're doing it. I'm not usually emotional, but I'm emotional today.
Bring whatever looks good. Okay.
Thank you. And I thank all of you people for what you've done for me.
Well, thank you.
Jim clearly cherished his brief flight, although he had originally jumped from a different C-47. That's All Brother, though, has plenty of stories of her own.
Dads, uncles, grandfathers, the men that flew this airplane had touched people's lives. The photos were still out there, the family albums, the archives, the information, and stories like Chappie Hall and his role as Jumping Jesus, this airborne paratrooper chaplain who jumped with the men. He had been noticing that paratroopers weren't attending his masses and his services, and he figured out that it was because there was a reticence to visit his services because he himself wasn't a jumper. So he decided to go and receive jump training, and he noted that there was a massive increase in the number of men who came to his services and his masses after he came back with his jump wings. Now, Hall was interesting not only for the fact that he went and became jump qualified as a chaplain, which at that time wasn't required, but that he chose to accompany the men to Normandy on the D-Day mission. Now, a chaplain could be argued to be not necessarily essential personnel in that first wave, but he felt strongly that as shepherd to those men, that he should endure the same challenges that they do, and basically go over there with them. So he joined the unit on board That's All Brother, and he basically jumped right behind Old Mo Mosley, who was the unit's commanding officer. And in the airborne, there's a culture of, the officer is always leading the way. He's always the first one out of the airplane. And Mosley was no different. They weren't the only unique characters on the airplane. In fact, David Daniel, the commander of the 87th Troop Carrier Squadron, to which That's All Brother belonged, brought along his Scottish Terrier. Now, we had this sort of obscure reference to there being a Scottish Terrier on board the airplane, sat upon a stack of flak jackets from the memoirs of Chappie Hall. But it would be some months later during the crowdfunding campaign that we were actually shown a picture of the dog. The crew, when they returned to England, was photographed, and we were all looking at it really interestingly, thinking, wow, this is the crew as they return. Look at the load of stress that's off their shoulders, but they're also weary from a long mission. And we had the picture in our hands for a couple of days before someone finally said, did you guys see the dog in the middle of the picture? And sure enough, this black Scotty is in David Daniel's arm, and you can see his eyes reflecting the flash, and that's basically the only way you see him, but he's cradled right there in his arm.
Wings over Dallas. The airshow provides the final opportunity to run a full dress rehearsal for the That's All Brother crew and paratroopers. Full period uniforms, round chutes, and perfect flying conditions. With luck, exactly what they will find when jumping in France in June.
So right now I'm hooking up all my communications. I have a radio so that I can talk to the drop zone safety officer, and then I've got a helmet that I'm going to wear with communications with the air crew and all the radios for the air show. So I've got to get myself wired up to be ready for the communications. I'm also going to be making sure that my safety hookup is secure. In this case today, I'm wearing a parachute rig instead of just a safety harness. So if there's a problem, I'll be able to go out the aircraft by parachute instead of having to stay with the airplane.
Despite the perfect weather conditions, there are many matters for the jump master to consider. Wind strength, direction, and the speed of the aircraft must be finely judged. The jump only goes ahead on his command. An airshow inevitably means a very crowded airspace too, and more than ever, safety considerations are paramount.
When you stumble into a story as big as That's All Brother, as the airplane that led the invasion, having gone missing and been found, that airplane is fundamentally important. The D-Day narrative, the experience of the men who fought in that battle, and the importance of this relic are connected with what it means to be an American. These airplanes represent, or specifically this airplane, represents an incredible piece of the cultural commonwealth of America. A part of what makes us who we are today is wrapped up in this machine. Those men who were on board flew over willing to risk their lives, knowing full well they wouldn't all make it back, in the cause of global freedom. This airplane has already lasted longer than any of the men who flew it that night or who jumped from it that night. And that is a small taste of how important it is, because for generations to come, this airplane will represent the only real link to that time. This airplane will be a time machine that reminds people that it was real, that those challenges were there, that tyranny was a problem, and that people were willing to stand up and sort of fight for what was right.
At last, the day has come. That's All Brother has completed her astonishing restoration from boneyard to, very soon, battlefield. She's undergone every form of preparation and proved herself worthy in all tests and under all conditions. Now she is ready for her return to France. But first, the arduous Atlantic Bridge crossing must be negotiated. Every journey begins with a single step. For that soul brother en route to France, that means a trip from Texas to New Orleans. She will have to visit 5 other states before leaving US airspace, before realizing the dreams of the CAF and all those who have brought her this far, before revisiting her defining moment. 75 years on, and counting.